Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you today, Ken?
Exceptionally well, Rory. I'm delighted to be here, and you're joining us on the Counselling Tutor Podcast. This is episode 160. We're certainly clocking up those episodes, Rory, and we've got 3 sections we're going to be covering today. We'll start off with our introduction session, which is our student check-in, where we cover a student-related topic, and we're going to be speaking about blended learning in counselling, training and practice. After that, we're going to go into our brand new section called Digital Counselling Revolution. This is where we kind of look at the movement towards online counselling, and we're going to be looking at the benefits and challenges of working online with clients. And in our final section, we look at our qualified practitioner colleagues with practice matters, and we're going to be speaking to Nicola Hughes, who is a bereavement specialist lecturer today. Exciting, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. It's a fully packed episode, and we kick off really with the new norm, which is a phrase that's being used in the media. We seem to hear it quite a lot in conversations, and that new norm is, of course, student training and practice. As we move, still in the COVID situation of COVID, students who are going back to college or university are finding themselves in slightly different circumstances, and we're finding that blended training is becoming the norm. Some courses are going completely online, some are going to be in class 1 week, and maybe on the internet working through a video feed the next week. Some are going to be mixed, some are going to be video and class. So it's a real change, and I think for the first time in the history of counselling training, this has happened. It is literally a revolution. It's a complete change, and those of you who are students who'll be going back to your studies or starting your studies will be part of a brand new phase in counselling. It's just amazing, and I think really, really exciting.
Exciting and challenging. And if you want to know more about this topic, we started covering it in last week's episode. So go back and have a listen to episode 159, where we kind of lay the foundations of what it looks like in this new learning environment. But today we wanted to really drill down on blended learning. So this is the term that has kind of been introduced. Now, interestingly enough, the term blended learning has been around for decades, really. And I know, Rory, when you and I were tutoring together, we had a focus on blended learning. And blended learning, basically what it means is a blend or a mixture of different ways of consuming the information to be able to get the learning outcome. So can you kind of give us an overview, Rory, of what blended learning is, kind of a bit of a definition?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you rightly allude to, Ken, it's a bit of a mix. Traditional learning, you go into the classroom, tutor would give a lecture, you may do small workshops with your peers, you may do question and answers. You could just watch the lecture. You could just sit and watch the lecture and consume the lecture. In this new world, blended learning will be that you'll probably have some form of formal tuition, and then you'll be given maybe videos to watch or resources to have a look at, or even check-in online. So it may be that some of you will be doing skill sessions with somebody else online. And that blend is the use of traditional face-to-face classroom teaching, and also the use of technology aiding your learning. And here's the thing, the biggest difference is that you have to do different things when you're using the computer side of things. You may be given a list of resources you have to look at, and you have to look at them. And one of the other challenges, I guess, is that in a classroom, a teacher can see if someone's what we used to call on task, the old teacher training on task. It's a bit more difficult for tutors to do that when they're saying to students, we'd like you to review this video, come back and discuss it next week. because there's no opportunity for the tutor to know if you've watched it. So it's really even more taking responsibility for your own learning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely taking responsibility for your own learning. The advantage is, I think, is that you're going to be exposed to a huge amount of information. Traditionally, it was core textbooks and core ideas. Now, with blended learning, you've got the whole of the internet at your disposal, lots of resources, and huge amounts of learning groups. And talking about learning groups, I can't let that pass without mentioning our Facebook group. If you're not a member of our Facebook group, type in Counselling Tutor. We're a closed group, so knock on the door. We're going to let you in. You find thousands of like-minded people, lots of students studying, lots of great conversations, talking about theory. That is a real example of blended learning, where you have a whole forum of people qualified, some tutors, some more senior practitioners, some qualified counsellors. You ask a question and you get a lot of rich feedback.
Yeah.
That is the excitement of the blended learning, because you're being exposed to just so much more information. And that is the blend. And then you take that information back, and that will link in maybe to your writing your criteria. So I'd say that your learning now is bigger than the college library or the university library. You've got the world at your fingertips.
You have. And the key for me, Rory, you mentioned, and I really like the little phrase, you are now responsible for your own learning. No more going into college, and it's up to the college to impart that information and get it in your head. You're going to possibly be spending a lot of the time in your home or in a workplace looking at a computer screen to gather the information, and the responsibility does fall upon yourself. So going back to that blended learning, Rory, you and I, we've been working with blended learning for many years. We've been working with, experimenting with, and perfecting how to get learning outcomes from blended learning. We have a complete resources called the Counselling Study Resource, where we've got hundreds of hours of lectures that kind of are mapped to the very course that you would be doing at the moment if you're in the UK and are doing a course from one of the UK awarding bodies. And we've got, I guess, over the years, tens of thousands of students that have used Counselling Study Resource to reach their learning outcomes. And of course, if you wanted to check out our learning resources, really, really helpful at a time now where you are responsible for your own learning, just go to counsellingtutor.com and all the information is on that page. But what we've learned, and here's the takeaway that we've learned with blended learning, is that you can get really good learning outcomes. And it's about identifying what your learning style is. So, for instance, if your learning style is auditory, then you would find it easier to learn something if you are hearing it. If your learning style is kinesthetic, you would find it easier to commit something to memory by writing it down. And if it's video, then you're going to be wanting to watch, if it is visual, you're going to be wanting to watch somebody do something so that you can reinforce that learning. And blended learning, I guess, gives you the opportunity to choose your learning style and choose the resources that best fit the way that you learn. So an example of that is I am dyslexic, and writing stuff down really doesn't work for me. In fact, it does the opposite. It brings up anxiety in me. I like to learn with my ears. I like to listen to things. One of the things I can say was in our Counselling Study Resources, all of our lectures and resources that are video-based also have an audio aspect that you can download, pop it on a phone, listen to that as you travel around, and hopefully you'll be able to do the same with your college. If they're delivering something online, you're going to want to be able to capture that somehow. Hopefully the college should be doing that, sharing it with you so that you can recap, which I guess in a face-to-face you wouldn't have that opportunity, Rory. You can't rewind a lecture that's been done, but if it's done digitally and it's done well, you can have that stored somewhere and revisit it specifically when it comes to assignment time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I think when I went back to my training, we were given a lecture, we were given the assignment, we were pointed towards the library, and it was see you in 4 weeks. And you brought your assignment back, your paper back, and you either passed or you were referred. And one of the frustrations was that I can remember thinking, there's nobody I know who's a counsellor. No one at all I know who's a counsellor. The internet was in its infancy. There was a few pages up, but very little. Now, a student, even on a level 2 course, can be an academic researcher. They can be an academic researcher. You can go, and as long as you're using resources which are academically sound, so you're using resources, say from Counselling Tutor, you're using resources from a publisher or from people who publish papers, or another university or college, you can get so much information, and there's a whole world of people to talk to. So it really, really is exciting. And I'm really thinking, Ken, I think that with the blended learning and the whole move towards helping students become little mini researchers, is that we'll have better informed students as they go through.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge of that is that when we see this move through, people start level 2 and level 3, that when they move up to the next level, tutors will have to step up to the mark, because they'll have classes full of really well-informed people.
Yes, definitely.
And it may be that the material that's being taught, and this is no disrespect to colleagues, I've had this myself, the game needs to be lifted up, because they may say, well, look, we know about this. So I think that the face-to-face teaching is going to change. I'm just so excited about it, because I think for the first time, they've been talking about this in education for years and years and years. When I taught, they talked about, expert learners. Now this is really happening, and we're going to see a complete lift in the knowledge base and the ability for anybody who's learning counselling at any level to have a deeper understanding of it. And I think that's a great thing.
Rory, I like your optimism that you've brought that with. And I think that is a really important part of this. It is the new normal. Things have changed. Going back to your studies and expecting it to be the same as it was, well, it's just not going to be. And it's about our mindset. Do we take a negative mindset and go, oh, this is this and this is that and this is the next thing? And that negative mindset, where's that going to get you? So I challenge you listening to this today. Change that negative mindset, if you have one, into a positive mindset, one of excitement, one of the student who wants to learn and who takes responsibility for their own learning, because the world is open. I think there's a power shift where I guess the learning institution held the power. We would go to the source of information and we would sit down within the walls, and that information would be imparted with us. Now you can gather that information from multiple sources. And again, as Rory said, make sure that you're using academically robust resources. When you don't want to be going on Wikipedia to write your assignments. You want to use academically robust resources which are citable. Counselling tutor resources are citable. Anything from a university, college, library is citable. Anything from a written textbook is citable. So something that is citable, and you can really expand your knowledge. So an example of that is if you take something like Carl Rogers' 19 propositions. During your studies, you may have perchance one lecture on the 19 propositions, and you would get the information that was contained therein. Now, with responsibility for your own learning, you can go to a number of different sources, and you can really broaden your understanding of those 19 propositions. You can get what is delivered from your learning provider, your institution, but then the onus is on you. Let me dive deeper, get a better understanding of it. So I'm with you, Rory. I think it's an exciting time. I think our mindset needs to be set in the right place. We need to see it for what it is. It's new. It's evolving as we go. There's going to be hiccups. But if we take responsibility for our own learning, make it happen, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this has been prophesied to some extent. Anybody who's a scholar of Carl Rogers knows that he spoke a lot about the people of tomorrow. He was an optimistic person who knew that society's changed and moved, and their thinking and the way that people learned and interacted was going to change. And he talked in his last book, A Way of Being, that the people of tomorrow will be different therapists. You students, you there that I'm talking to, listening on your headphones, when you sit in that classroom or sit on your computer from wherever you're working from, you are that person of tomorrow. You are leading a step change in counselling, and it will be for the benefit of clients, which everything we do is for the benefits of clients. But I think even more than that, you'll be probably better educated than anyone who's gone before in our profession, because the point of blended learning is to open a whole new world to you. And even just saying this, Ken, I'm thinking, God, I wish I was going back to studies again. I wish I was going back to studies again, because my world was the library, the brief, the assignment brief, and a lecture,
and some books.
And some books.
Yeah.
And that is a very small world. When we learn, we need to make our world bigger. And blended learning is doing absolutely just that.
Love that. And if you're interested in looking at the Counselling Tutor study resources, just pop on over to counsellingtutor.com. All the information is there. And we'll end this by kind of just recapping what you've said there, those words of Carl Rogers. He spoke about the people of tomorrow. Well, tomorrow is today now, Rory. We are those people. It is today. It's actually happening. It's exciting. Go grab it with both hands. So
Go into the world with brilliance. Go into the world with brilliance.
Indeed, as we leave our student check-in behind, we're about to jump into our Digital Counselling Revolution.
Digital Counselling Revolution.
Digital Counselling Revolution is where we take a look at where therapy is going in this age, with social distancing, with lockdown. We were kind of forced to look at other ways of delivering therapy. Online telephone has become incredibly popular, and Digital Counselling Revolution, we kind of look at that aspect of delivering therapy. And today we wanted to speak about the benefits and challenges of working online with clients, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And COVID has been a bit of a dual-sided coin, if you excuse the mixed metaphor. It's people have been forced into working online. I think a lot of people would say that it's forced a relook and a reevaluation of how we practice. But what it's also done is it's reached out to people who would have been excluded from counselling. Traditional counselling models were you turned up at a therapist office or the office of the placement you worked at. You would travel there, maybe take you half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. You'd go in, you'd have your 50-minute session, which is the 50-minute hour we have in counselling. Then you would travel home again, which is fine if you have the ability to be able to travel and get there. And if you can get there, there's a lot of people who are housebound, who may not be able to travel, who live far away from a therapist. Now, with the use of online counselling, be it by phone or be it by video link or even by text, people can access it from their own homes. That means more people being helped. Goodness gracious me, we have a huge mental health well-being problem in the UK, and by what I've read, something that's pretty much throughout the world. And part of it is people not being able to access services because they're either disadvantaged or they can't get there, or their life, they may have children or so many things that would stop people stepping into a therapist's office. So one of the great benefits of online counselling is that more people can access it.
I like that, Rory.
More people can get help. And sometimes I think that's forgotten in all the hyperbole of, we're moving online and there's new ethical codes and what modality shall I use and getting locked into modalities and therapy. It's about helping people at the end of the day. There's someone sat somewhere in misery, needing someone to speak to, needing help, could be on the edge of, maybe thinking, is it worth living? And just to hear someone, just to speak with someone is exactly what we do. That's what therapy is about. And that is that for me is probably the biggest benefit of working online.
Yeah, and that what I like about that, Rory, it's you speaking about counselling therapy from your own home at a time that suits you. That's for the client we're talking about here. Great benefit for the client. And from an agency perspective or from a private practitioner perspective, the same is true, because the practitioner also doesn't necessarily need to hire a room, move to a room to be able to offer that service. It can be offered from a suitable room or place within your home, which I think is also a great benefit. And one of the things that this brings up for me is that it can, if managed properly, reduce waiting times. And you only need to go to a GP and require some kind of counselling or psychological help to see that suddenly a magical waiting time, which is usually pretty long, gets put in front of you before you can engage in therapy. And I guess by services moving online, it may eventually reduce those waiting lists because it is more immediate, I guess, working online. So there's something to think about. And the other thing, another benefit, I guess, for our clients that may choose to engage online is where the software is at this present moment, because we have a lot of secure inscription software which offers confidentiality. So that confidentiality is not absolute because we are kind of putting our trust in external service providers. But you should, of course, look at your external providers really carefully. And that's part of the things that we cover in our online and telephone counselling training course, is how to kind of vet what software you should be using and all the agreements that you have to have in place with your software service providers, such as if you're using Zoom, you should have a signed document with Zoom to kind of cover yourself in the eventuality that something goes wrong there. But generally, it does give a real sense of I guess, confidentiality working online. It's unlikely that somebody's going to hear you through the door of the counselling room or see you entering into counselling, which I know for some clients, they don't want to be seen going into a counsellor's room and that a building that may be known for counselling provision, and they have to walk in and they have to walk out. Well, if they're engaging online, that just falls away, which I guess is another benefit, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it makes counselling come of age to some extent. You know, when I started 20 years ago, it was still a bit of an elitist pursuit, and now it's become very egalitarian. Is that the word? Egalitarian, meaning for the people. Possibly have to look that up. Never use words you don't know the meaning of, Rory. Note to self.
Especially not on a live podcast.
Especially not on the podcast. I think it is egalitarian. It's become more accepted, and I think that's a really big thing. You know, again, if I think of when I started, counselling was seen as a bit of an activity for weak people, and those weren't my words. Those are the words of people I used to speak to people when I was training. They go, yeah, but it's only for people who have got mental health problems, isn't it? Nowadays, there's this acceptance that sometimes through our lives we'll struggle, and we might need some external help. And the absolute benefit is that we can get it. You can get it when you need the help. You know, could you imagine going to the doctor and saying, you know, I broke my arm, and the doctor said, well, there's a waiting list for bandages and slings and casts. So if you come back in 6 months' time, and by that time it might have healed. Well, it might have done, but your arm might still be in very big difficulties. So I think it's about treating our mental well-being in the same frame that we treat our physical well-being. That when someone goes with emotional or mental difficulties, and I use the word very carefully, mental, that can be helped, and it can be given as quickly as possible. You know, and that is again one of the great benefits of the digital revolution, the digital counselling revolution. But I do think there are challenges, and we need to speak about those. It doesn't come without challenges. And one of the challenges, the biggest challenge in my view, is practitioner training. That's the biggest challenge, without a doubt, because you're having to move from traditional face-to-face to using technology, to understanding the psychological theories that underpin counselling intervention when you're using online, things like the disinhibition effect, the black hole effect. And also changing the way that we use our skills. There's completely different skill sets if you're using phone to if you're using a video feed. So I think the biggest challenge is practitioners' conversion and getting practitioners confident confident for the practitioner to be able to switch on their device and be effective therapists.
100%, Rory. Training is imperative. It is an ethical imperative to do the training that you need to be able to service your clients ethically and safely. And there is so much to consider when moving online. We run, in fact, this section is sponsored by our training, which is a online and telephone counselling training course. And one of the things we notice within that course is our students kind of, when they're kind of getting into the course, are saying, wow, I didn't know there was so much to learn. I didn't know that there was so much that is different to face. And what we don't know, we don't know. You know, that ignorance, you don't see it. And we saw this as kind of COVID hit with certain agencies suggesting that counsellors just, oh, well, we can't see our clients face to face. Maybe just pick up the phone, give them a call. And I think that slowly the message is getting through that is not the best way of doing things, because there is so much to consider. And I agree with you. That is one of the challenges, is practitioner training. If you're interested in looking at our training, we've had over 5,000 counsellors, psychotherapists work their way through that training since COVID hit, and you can find out more information on that at counsellingtutor.com. That's the place to go for all information, really, on anything that we talk about in the podcast. More things to consider if you're working online is that it's not going to be a good fit for every single client. So your assessment process of how you kind of check who this client is really, really important. Some people are really not comfortable using internet technology. And when I say some people, I'm not just talking clients here, some counselors as well. I mean, part of the training course should be looking at your mindset. And in fact, if you go back to episode 159 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, we have a whole section just speaking about mindset from the practitioner's point of view and how important that is, that we don't kind of contaminate or color the relationship with our own maybe lack of understanding of technology. But similarly, client that may not be au fait with working online, they might not want to be seen on video. They might not want their home to be seen on video. So there's some considerations there of who that client may be and their relationship with technology. And of course, many clients may say that they would choose to rather see a face-to-face counsellor, that they want to be in a room, they feel more heard if they're in a room and if there is a physical person there. And this is their choice. This is their choice. And we have to kind of consider that as we're looking at these benefits, these challenges of working online.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, let's not forget that some people may not understand that therapy can be effective online. I've heard of a couple of incidents, or instances, should I say, where clients have become quite upset and defensive and said, I want to see a face-to-face counsellor. Isn't what I'm going through sufficient to actually see someone face-to-face? I think sometimes that's about misinformation of what online counselling is. I think the general public may see online counselling as maybe doing a self-assessment, or maybe working with artificial intelligence as opposed to seeing a real person either on the screen or talking to them on the phone. So, we have to honour clients' autonomy, but my feeling is that more and more of the general public are understanding that online is a bigger part of their lives. A good example of that is banks. I was really against having a banking app on my phone. I used to go into the bank and chunner away. Now I've got a banking app. It's just second nature to me, and it works very well. And I think the same can be said for counselling. I think people may have a very fixed view of what counselling is, and in these changing times, it's evolving, it's changing, but it can just be effective. But we always have to honour what the client wants. We have to adapt to their needs, because after all, they're our reason for being.
Indeed. One last challenge that I want to consider, and there are many more. There really are many more. They're covered, I guess, more in depth when you do a formal training course on online and telephone counselling. But what I wanted to cover is that not all client presentations are best handled remotely. There are certain presentations, and we're not going to go into a list of what those presentations are, because that's why the training is so important. As a practitioner, when a client is coming with a certain presentation, you're kind of assessing that and going, can this be worked with online? And there are certain presentations that cannot be worked with online. Not cannot, but maybe should not be worked with online and would benefit from more of a face-to-face. And finally, Rory, you've already kind of covered this challenge, I guess, and that is that there are sometimes no non-verbal clues or body language. And it's interesting. We forget how much we pick up from clients in our face-to-face counselling sessions that is non-verbal. It might be how their shoulders sit. It might be what they're doing with their hands. They may be wringing their hands. And that kind of is cut away if we're working online. Even if you're working with video, at best, you're maybe going to be looking at a passport photo, really, of your client. You won't see the rest of their body. You won't be able to see if they're clenching or wringing their hands. And working without non-verbal clues, without that body language, definitely amplified if you're working over the telephone. Again, what does it come down to? Adequate training for the practitioner to know how to work with that. And of course, if you're interested in checking out the Counselling Tutor online and telephone counselling training course, you can do so at counsellingtutor.com. All the information is there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually made a handout, benefits and challenges of working online. So if you go to counsellingtutor.com, look at the podcast tab, go to episode 160. There's a handout waiting for you called Benefits of Challenges of Working Online. And it basically just is a précis of what Ken and myself have been alluding to in the podcast. Just gives you some idea. Handy checklist to have by you should you have to do an assessment with someone, just to crystallize your thinking. But 160, podcast 160, in the podcast tab of Counselling Tutor.
Yep, that's that super duper handout, free of charge, and it's got a list of benefits and challenges there that you can kind of look at and keep for your consideration. Moving away now from Digital Counselling Revolution, addressing our qualified practitioner friends out there where we look at practice matters. And Rory, you recently met up with Nicola Hughes to speak about bereavement, in-depth in bereavement. And just before you kind of give us a taste of that, I just wanted to share a little bit about Nicola. Her first placement was with a bereavement charity as a student. So it's kind of, she entered working with bereavement right when she was studying. And she's now been working with bereaved children and their families for over 10 years. So an absolute wealth of information that Nicola Hughes brings to this kind of interview that you did. And Nicola does a lot of training professionals within schools, within the community and universities on bereavement. And of course, she did a lecture for us in our CPD library. And she's also a group supervisor within a bereavement charity. Can you kind of give us a bit of a taste of what we can expect from Nicola's mini lecture, I guess, on the podcast today?
Indeed, it was what I would call a lively interview, and Nicola really brought to light how to work with bereavement, and I guess the fact that bereavement comes up more often than we would think. When people think about bereavement, we think about people who've died, lost, and of course that is bereavement. But bereavement can take many forms. And Nicola outlined a huge amount of really valuable information regarding working with bereavement. And she did it in a really easy to access and, as I said, lively way. So let's hear what Nicola has to say.
Practice matters.
And we welcome Nicola Hughes, who has recorded a wonderful lecture on bereavement. So welcome, Nicola.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And you've recorded a wonderful lecture on bereavement. And I don't know what your experience of bereavement is in terms of people understanding it, but there's so many models, some of them that are really not that helpful nowadays.
Oh, we're going down that route. The unhelpful kind of thinking of the past was really about that you can move on from your grief, that you can kind of do the recovery work, if you like, and then leave it behind you. And today, really, what we're talking about is you can grieve, and certainly it's very painful, difficult in the early days, and for a lot longer than people would imagine, really. But you don't have to move on from it. You can take that grief with you, and you can learn how that grief can become part of your life and become a useful part of your life, not necessarily a bad, difficult part of your life.
Yes, because that was quite that people would say, certainly in the north of England, oh, you'll move on from it.
Yes,
seems to be a cultural thing. I'm sure that happens in other areas of the world and the country.
Yeah.
But I heard that as a child, and that's certainly not my experience of grief, and it's certainly not the experience that I've had with with lots of clients that I've worked with. You talk early in the lecture about your person's understanding of grief. You kind of give a 1 to 10 kind of count, if you like. 1 not knowing a lot, 10 knowing a lot. Do you think that's important for practitioners to understand their own grief process before they can work with clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that scaling, really, I tend to do that in a lot of my training, because it's really good as a learner to know where your knowledge is, and then you know that whether the training's been useful or not, because you always grow in any experience. So yeah, that's about that. But also, we do with any counselling topic, I think it's important to know where we are first. And I always start with what's our experience, whether it's talking about bereavement, working creatively, perinatal mental health, any of the other things that I've experienced with and training with. What about you as a practitioner first? Because you can't really help other people if you've been there, unless you've been there yourself. That's my belief.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that like a lot of things in counselling, you can only really empathise if you've had some experience, or you're willing to open yourself up to the experience of it. Obviously we can't experience everything our clients go through, but I do think with things like loss and bereavement, having an understanding of our own process is mightily helpful when we're working with we're working with clients. And what I particularly like in your lecture is the use of euphemisms.
Yes, you can say it. I couldn't say the word. I struggled.
So some of them I hear are regularly used. Certainly, I live in a little northern village at the base of the Pennines here in the north of England, and I could hear these on a regular basis. Things like popped his clogs, pushing up daisies, kick the bucket, brown bread.
Yes,
which is a particularly northern one, I think.
Cockney slang.
Yeah, Cockney slang. Looking through the pearly gates, rest in peace. There's just so many of them. It's important, or is it important, should I say, that we understand the euphemisms that clients bring as metaphors so that we can work with them?
Yeah, using it as a metaphor can be really useful. What does is there a connection to the words that you're using? I think from my experience, mostly it's avoiding something. I don't really want to say what it is. And I think particularly when we work with children, it's really important to be very explicit about what we're saying. I went out for a meal with my children the other day, and we were with my mother-in-law, and they started to say to her, when you die, are you going to go into the earth or go into the fire? And I misunderstood what they were saying. I thought they were talking about her going to hell and being in the fire. I didn't think I'd had this conversation with them. And my husband said, no, they're talking about cremation or being buried. Oh, and my mother-in-law was like, why are we having this conversation? I'm like, well, it's really good that they're aware of it, because one day you're going to die. And I don't have to explain that to them. They will already know. They'll have that language, cremation and being buried. And it's about, a language is really interesting anyway, but particularly with death and bereavement, looking at the language we use.
Yes, it's about normalising a part of our lives, the end of it, isn't it? And I think you strike on a really interesting idea here, is that we do euphemize or metaphor. I don't know if metaphorize is a word. If it is, if it's not, it is now. Metaphorize death, and it's really interesting. A lot of people try and avoid the word death, but when we're working, certainly as therapists, we use that word a lot because that's the reality of it, isn't it? You know,
it's good to check out how the clients feel about the word death and dying, and it might be that you need to use their metaphors or euphemisms because it's too soon.
Yes,
that everyone's on a journey. Really, it might be too soon.
Yes, and I think specifically when one's working with children, you're using a clean language that children understand is really important. So when I use the word clean language, I'm not talking about the words swearing or other kinds of bad language. I'm talking about really clear language that people can understand, and death is one of them.
Yeah, we're moving on to my next lecture, which I'm going to be doing for you in the summer, children and loss.
Yes, indeed.
We're diverting.
We are, and thank you for that small plug. I'm sure that the people listening will be delighted that you're going to do children and loss lecture, because it is something
so important. Yeah,
absolutely. Thinking of diversity, I think one of the things that practitioners really need to understand is that death has different meanings, and the rituals around death have different meanings for different groups, and being sensitive to that. There's some different forms of mourning rituals. What would you suggest to a practitioner who may be working with someone who is from a different culture, or maybe has really specific ideas about how death is handled, if you like?
I think the key really is to be open-minded and curious. So a lot of my experience has been working in Bradford, which is a very rich multicultural area. And I naively thought I could do a bit of reading and learn about every ritual and events that I would see. And actually there's differences within different cultures. What I found was that people were more than happy to explain what's happened in their, in some cultures, you're buried quite quickly within 24 hours. And just having a little understanding of that when a family's stressed, if that hasn't happened because the environment they're in hasn't allowed for that. I mean, Bradford's great. We allow for people to have their own experiences and their own cultures. So yeah, being curious and open-minded, but to remember the explaining and the information sharing is part of the grieving process. I've found that it's really important for people to be able to say it as it is and tell me what happened, and for me to be curious. Oh, I'm not sure about that. I've not heard that before. Can you say a little bit more about that experience? And to know that, that there might be an open casket in a lounge and that might not be familiar to you, but that is part of the culture, and the children are okay with that, because that is, whereas if you react in a very horrified way, that's, poor kids, that's not all right, then you're kind of denying part of their experience and their culture and shaming them, which, is not okay.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that really kind of shows difference. Whenever I've known a family and there's been a bereavement, someone's died, it's noticeable how each different family, and depending on their faith position or their world view, has a different kind of funeral. I saw one, wasn't a member of my family, but someone who was buried in a coffin that looked like a Mars bar, which, for those people who are listening outside the UK, is a chocolate bar, which is oblong, and people can buy all sorts of different regalia and coffins and for, depending on the wishes of the person who's deceased and the family. So I think not being surprised is a key thing here. Not being taken aback by how different people deal with grief.
Yeah, and this leads sort of nicely on to thinking about your own funeral, maybe, and within the talk, I talk about, have you thought about it? Have you thought about what you want, and discuss that with your family? It's a really important part of it, and I think it's an important part for us to think about as practitioners if we're going to do bereavement work as well. Absolutely.
I think looking at our own mortality is an important area of personal development, because as Abraham Lincoln famously said, there's two sure things in the world: death and taxes. And
yes.
And yes, looking at our own mortality, especially in things around clinical wills, making sure that if you're in practice and something happens, that someone knows how to deal with your clients. You can't have you can't have your relatives phoning clients up. That's just not correct at all. So yes, I think it comes down to really being honest with oneself about that part of life.
Yeah, it is certain, isn't it? So let's talk about it. Hence why I encourage that conversation with my children. They're going to be devastated when grandma dies, and to already have that knowledge of some of the things and practices that we might do doesn't come as a surprise. Then they've known it for a while, and we can just concentrate on the feelings being heard.
Yes, absolutely. So I think it's an important lecture for anybody who is going to work with grief, and that's going to be every practitioner at some point.
Absolutely, yeah. I was going to say, it's not really a choice, is it? Bereavement and loss is foundational for any work that we do.
Absolutely. And I mean, you don't have to die to have bereavement and loss of a job, loss of health, are all forms of bereavement and loss. So that has been a real fascinating journey into bereavement. I've seen the lecture, and it is absolutely fantastic. I was enthralled from the opening when I was doing my 1 to 10, and the ending where I was thinking just how much more I'd learned. It really was a wonderful piece of work. Nicola Hughes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you very much, Rory. Thank you very much to Nicola Hughes. It's an important topic, and it comes up again and again and again in practice. It is something that if you haven't faced before is going to walk into your practice at some time working with bereavement. And I just wanted to kind of mention that Nicola has done a lecture. It's a full lecture on working with bereavement that is available in our CPD lecture library. More information on that, just go to counsellingtutor.com. It's a low cost to be able to access that lecture and over 150 hours of other lectures. And just to kind of give you what you might get from Nicola's lecture, she gets you to reflect on your own thoughts about grief and how that may affect you in your helping relationship. She gives you a great understanding of the bereavement theories and how to apply these theories in practice. And then she covers some of the factors that are affecting people that are experiencing bereavement and the possible reactions that you might see within the therapy room. And then she discusses some assessment options when working with bereaved clients. A really well worth lecture there. And that's at counsellingtutor.com. But moving on now, I guess, to the end of our podcast where we kind of look back and recap on what we've looked at today.
Absolutely. Well, we started with the changing world of counselling training, and we touched on blended counselling in training and practice. In the Digital Counselling Revolution, we talked about the benefits and challenges of working online. And then finally, we caught up with the fab Nicola Hughes, and she spoke about bereavement, a very lively conversation and one that I enjoyed. And as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and join the digital revolution.
If you're a qualified counsellor or psychotherapist, then why not check out the Counsellor CPD Library? Stay current with your CPD requirements with over 150 hours of academically rigorous, on-demand lectures you can stream to your device. Joining Counsellor CPD will expand your skill set to create a more specialised, highly rewarding practice. For more information on the Counsellor CPD library, visit counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.